Hello, welcome to Shad Life, and I am cracking up right now because I just got the Poseidon Norton delivered from FedEx, and when the driver dropped this off, I was like, no, that's not the right box. But then I saw Poseidon on the side here, and I was like, I mean, if that prevents them from laying it on its side, that's pretty awesome. Anyway, let's get this inside and start assembling it. Okay, after that, let's get this thing out of the box and into the stand and get kind of my initial impression of it. I already know there's some interesting things about this bike that I'm going to want to talk about, and some firsts for me for sure. So let's get it out of here and we will talk about those things. So it looks like it's pretty well packed. Well, so here's this thing, and I talk about upgradability all the time. The fact that it's got through axles is huge. Trust me, that is a big deal. And these bikes, these budget bikes that come with quick release, great, gets your foot in the door. Specifically speaking of like the Grand Canyon 5, but then you're kind of stuck because you can't really upgrade to much nicer components with things that are out of spec. So with today's standards. All right, I'm not gonna film me getting this all out of the box because that just makes the video too long. So I will get this out into the stand and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so what I'm noticing here, I see the handlebars are off, the rear wheel is off, so on and so forth. So this bike is going to require quite a bit more assembly than what I'm used to, because usually the rear wheel and all of that stuff is already installed, and some of the bikes, even the derailleur is all lined up and ready to go and set up. So even the fork is right here. I get why they do it, because they have a more compact size box, so it saves on shipping, but it's a little work on my end, which is fine. So let me get all this plastic wrap off and so on and so forth, get the seat installed, get it in the stand, and then we'll start to talk about kind of my initial impressions on some of the things on this bike. It is 2023 and we are well aware of the environmental impacts of like foam and these plastics and all this stuff. Completely unnecessary. So pet peeve number one right off the bat, Poseidon, you got to do a better job here. You know, I don't know if you're an environmentalist or not, but even if you're not, this is ridiculous. This is way overly excessive packaging. And I still got to get the plastic disc things off the wheels that are going to go in the garbage and so on and so forth. And we all know now that plastics do not get recycled like we thought they did. And I don't know what happens to all this foam. Yeah, sorry, but that's my rant. Poseidon, do a better job packaging your stuff. Minimize your environmental impact, please. All right, let's talk about the bike now. More foam. So this bike's going to require a lot of assembly. So the discs are here in my hand, so they're not assembled on the wheels at all. The headset is here in my hand, and I guess it's got the built-in cups into the frame, which some people like, some people don't. So there's going to be a lot of assembly here, and I'm not going to go through all of it. I think I'm just going to get this bike together and then talk about it. I mean, even it's actually like the derailleur's connected to the dropout, and the dropout needs to be mounted on the frame still. So that's interesting. I saw the through axle. This has Advent X, which I already know I like, but if you buy Advent X aftermarket, you get an aluminum carrier for your cassette. This is all steel, so this is really heavy. So you can definitely start to see where corners are cut. And another very interesting thing that I want to talk about once I get this bike assembled is these are cable actuated hydraulic brakes. I've heard of these. I've never actually used them or seen what they're like. So this will be awesome to get out and actually ride this and test it. Another thing that I know, and this is going to be something that probably is going to have to be replaced fairly quickly, is this is an internal bottom bracket with square taper cranks. If you don't know what square taper cranks are, it's like the old school. I mean, this comes back from like the 70s, where it's like a square shape and it gradually gets bigger on the spindle, and you literally press the crank on there, and they're not very reliable and strong. Every square taper crank I've ever had, I end up, kind of wearing out that connection between the spindle and the crank, ends up creaking a lot, comes loose, and so on and so forth. So crank set is definitely on the lower end variety, things like that. Keep in mind, we're talking a bike that's $999, but we got to compare it to other bikes. Like when I think about the Canyon, even though it didn't have the correct modern spec, it had an external bottom bracket and a much nicer hollow spindle crank. And that bike was $699 when I bought it. Now it's down in the mid 500 something. But definitely things to look at when you're talking about budget bikes and where are they cutting corners. And they definitely cut corners in the crank, definitely in the 10-speed cassette, and so on and so forth. But I also see some nice things here. I see sealed bearings, right? And these, the jury's out on these brakes. They definitely intrigue me. So that's cool. And upgradability, like this even has, supposedly it said in the, oh yeah, right here, the ability to do a dropper post through, internally. They even have a little catch back here, which I will be throwing a dropper post on this bike. So yeah, let me get it together and then we'll talk about it a little more. Okay, so this is interesting, this little mechanism at the end. What you have to do is you have to push on it to get it through the hole of the fork to get the through axle out. Quite an interesting design. Yeah, I don't know if I like it or not, but I do like the fact that it's unique. But it took me quite a bit of figuring out to figure out how it worked, but I figured it out. I suppose I probably could have just read directions, but of course I'm one of those. I don't like to read directions. Do I have to put these on it? This is where Polygon wins. They had sweet pedals with their bike. I actually am going to put these on and at least try with my 510s, just because they actually do have like round, even though they're plastic pins, and and they have some concave in the middle. I'll try them and let you know what I think. But for me to get aggro with this bike, I probably will want to put on some more legit pedals like those over there. So, but I'll try them to start and let you know what I think. I think they'll be mildly okay, but they're not going to have the grip I want. So normally what takes me about 15 minutes, because there's minimal assembly required for most bikes, this thing took me like 45 minutes. I had to put the rotors on the wheels, had to hook this thing up, put the rear wheel on, all that, get the fork on and all of that, and so on and so forth. So it was a lot more effort than what I'm normally used to, but not bad. I think the disadvantage of that is if you're not like, a seasoned mechanic, you try to do this yourself, there's a lot of areas you could screw up. Like, do you know that you absolutely should not touch the brake surface on the rotors, and getting them out of that little foam packing and installing them, you have to be careful to not get any oils or even grease from your hands on the rotors on the braking surface, because if you do, your brakes aren't going to work right, because then that gets in there and contaminates it. So there's just things like that that a lot of people just don't know, or that's kind of tricky, so on and so forth. Getting the drivetrain all put together correctly. The chain was kind of tangled up. I know how to untangle it, stuff like that. So yeah, a lot more complex assembly than other bikes I've gotten in the box like that. So let's talk about the bike itself. It's interesting because I feel like the frame is definitely the centerpiece of this bike. Like, it's like geometry wise, and we'll find out when I get out and ride it and stuff like that, and just looking at it and stuff, it's pretty nice. Like, it's got, you know, pretty decent welds and things like that. Looks good, modern looking, modern geometry, and it's got all modern spec, 12 millimeter by 148 rear end on there with the through axle. It's got the boost front axle. Of course, this is coming with this fork, which is going to be a coil fork. And the last Sun Tour fork, the one that came on the Grand Canyon 5, was like a pogo stick. Maybe this fork's a little bit better. It is a 34 millimeter stanchion, so maybe a little more heavy duty. We'll find out. But it is a spring fork, and it's really heavy. It is a heavy fork. I was quite surprised. It's like over 7 pounds for that fork. So speaking of weight, it is time to hit the scale and see what this bike weighs. There you have it. That is heavy for a hardtail. 34.7 pounds, we're gonna say. And clearly when I picked this bike up, the front end was really heavy. So, heavy bike for a hardtail. The fork is definitely, I mean, I compared it to like the DVO fork I have up there, and it's 3 pounds heavier. Granted, that DVO fork up there costs as much as this whole bike, pretty much. So I guess you can say that. Advent X drivetrain, but again, they went with a cheaper cassette, so you're not going to get the lightweight aluminum carrier that comes on Advent X when you buy it as a kit aftermarket. And one of the things that I'm super curious about on this bike are these cable actuated hydraulic brakes. I've actually like played with them, and if they work good, I'm going to be impressed, because they feel good. Just from what I'm doing there, they feel pretty good. And if these work good, I was thinking about this. This would be a great solution for slopestyle riders and people with DJ bikes, slopestyle bikes, whatever, because then you can run a cable actuated brake, have a standard gyro where your cables come in and you can spin the handlebars, and have it go back to a decent working hydraulic brake. So yeah, if these work good, I'm definitely going to throw that into the air. Like, why aren't slopestyle riders running brakes like this? So there you have it. I'm going to get out and ride this bike. Give you, of course, my opinions on that. I used to have these tires on one of my bikes in 26-inch. I went on the Kenda website, and I could not find a 27.5 by, is this a 2.3 slant 6 available to buy. So I'm assuming these are specifically spec'd OEM for this bike. I know they're going to roll pretty good. They should have good traction. I should like them. The disadvantage of them is their 30 TPI casing and their wire bead. So they're not a folding bead. And these aren't set up to be tubeless. They're not taped or anything like that to be tubeless. So I don't even know if you can run tubeless. My experience is if I use orange wherever my orange that I like to use, this endurance sealant, even with tires and rims that aren't designed to be tubeless, it'll actually seal them up pretty good. So I might try tubeless on here. It's just a lot of work taping the rims and doing that, but for now I'm just going to test it with tubes in it and look for weight savings elsewhere. Cool. So there you have it. I'm really excited to ride this bike. This is going to be a very intriguing budget bike review because there's just some interesting things. These hydraulic disc brakes for one, and the upgradability potential of this bike. If I like how it rides, it has some potential because it's got all modern spec. It's got tapered head tube. That's something you want. 1.5 up front, or sorry, 1 1/8 at the top, 1.5 at the bottom. I forget what the metric measurement is for the top. It's got the through axle, 12 millimeter, 1/48 spacing in the rear, like I talked about. It's got a standard threaded bottom bracket, 73 millimeters wide, so you can upgrade the crank and the external bottom bracket and be just fine. Like, tons of potential. It's got routing for dropper posts. You can upgrade it with a dropper post. Definitely probably upgrade stem, handlebars. I mean, it's got a lot of upgradable potential, and even though that might cost you a lot of money in the long run, the idea behind a budget bike is for people who just can't dump $3,000 into a bike or $4,000 or whatever, right? Like, you're on a budget and maybe you've got $1,000 you're going to put into this bike and start riding it, get your foot in the door, start learning things. And then as you go, you save up more money, upgrade a component like the fork or something. Save a little more money after that, get a new cassette that's lighter weight. Advent X is cool, so we'll leave that. Then you get more money and you upgrade the crankset and the bottom bracket. Next thing you know, you have a nicer bike. Like, you have a bike that is right up there with, the bikes I ride pretty much, that are, $3,000-$4,000. So that is the point of something like this. Is the thing that I want to find out is this frame worthy of doing all that? So that's what we're going to find out. So there you go. I really appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.